What's going on, guys? I'm George, and today I'm solving Reddit's wiring problems. I came across this question in the Z31 subreddit where Mountain Special is asking, "Hi, could someone guide me in what order to connect the TPS?" If we take a look at the picture that he's included, I see three wires that he's holding in his hand that look like they're, from a 1980s wiring harness, and they've had the connector cut off. Now, it also looks like a brand new pigtail coming off of the TPS with three different colored wires, and I'm guessing he's trying to figure out how to connect those up. So in the video today, what I'm going to be covering is how to read connectors and map them to the factory service manual, how to identify the wires that you need to connect, different ways that you can test those wires to make sure that you absolutely have the right ones, and then we'll make sure to get this question properly answered. If you like the idea of me solving people's wiring problems, don't forget to like the video. Let's get into it. I've got the EF and EC sections of the 1988 Nissan 300ZX factory service manual. What I'm going to be looking at right now is ECCS wiring diagram, what we have on page 12. This is where we've got the good stuff. So I've already done some highlighting and identifying, but let me zoom in and we can get into the details. Right here, we see the throttle sensor or TPS. That's what we're going to be looking at. And the first thing that I want to look at is this connector. Now, the way connectors are shown in factory service manual wiring diagrams is as though you're looking at the front of the connector. Now, we can see in the factory service manual, there's this notch that sticks out of the connector. Now, it's important when you're looking at your own connector, this is just a dummy wire, to orient your connector so that your notch is also in the same direction as what you're looking at on the FSM. That way, you can look at your pins top to bottom and you know that the orientation is going to be the same. So for this connector, I would be looking at it this way, as though I am the other connector. And then keeping in mind which side the notch is on, flipping it if necessary, then I can identify my pins top to bottom, as well as on one side of the notch all the way to the other. Looking at this, we see three pins, which we already knew. They are labeled L, which in Nissan factory service manual speak actually means blue. It's just they don't use B because B is reserved for black. We have W, which I've identified with yellow because W is white and white on white isn't really going to show very well. And then we have B, the black wire. Let's take a look at where these wires actually end up, starting with the blue wire. That blue wire ends, again, still blue, at pin 33 on the ECCS control unit on the ECU. Now, that pin is right here. It is difficult to see. However, if you take a look at some of these numbers, you can make out vague 29 here. This is 30, 31, 32, and I've labeled 33 here. Our white wire, this was the easiest one to trace because you'll notice that there's a dotted line on either side of it. That denotes shielding. What that tells me is that this wire is very likely our signal wire. You'll put shielding around a wire if you want to make sure that it doesn't have any electromagnetic interference from other wires that are wrapped together with it in a harness. And this wire, the white one, ends at pin 110. Pin 110 is also on the ECU right here. There it is. Lastly, we have our black wire. Now the black wire comes across and ends at pin 26, which is right here. Again, it's difficult to see, but you can count them 21, 22, 3, 4, 25, and pin 26 right here on the ECU. There are a few different ways that you can test these wires to make sure that you have the right ones. One of the easiest options is by going to your ECU and checking for continuity between the pin on the ECU side and then the end of your wire. So you can grab your multimeter. Yes, I brought visual aids. Turn it to the continuity test setting, where if I connect my two pins, you can see continuity. And then take one end, put it into the connector on the ECU side, and then the other end touching the wire at the TPS side, and that will help you identify your black wire, or what would be your black wire, your blue wire, and your white wire. Because it does look like from the picture, the wire color doesn't match what I'm looking at in the 1988 factory service manual. Another test that you can run is a voltage check. So if you take your car and put the key to the ignition position, you should be able to take those 3 wires. One of them will have power going to your sensor. Another one will be a clean ground, and your third is likely to be your signal wire. Now that one may have power and be grounding to detect the signal, but it may also just appear to be a dead wire. Now, the way I would test this is, again, grabbing the multimeter, turning to voltage DC. I'm set to 20 volts because I would be measuring for around 12. And then just checking those wires, each of them first against a ground, to see where you find voltage, right? Recognize your voltage wire, label it. For the ground wire, take the positive side of your multimeter, put it to your battery's positive terminal, and then take the negative side and see which of your wires results in a 12 volt. That will be your ground. The third wire is going to be your signal wire. There is a little bit more information that we can infer from the factory service manual wiring diagram. Take a close look at some of these wires. For the black wire, right here, we see that there's another split off. What that tells me is that this can't be the signal wire, because there are no 2 places you would send a TPS signal, right? You have your ECU, it wouldn't go anywhere else. And there's also nowhere else that you would be getting a TPS reading from. So for this wire to fork off to multiple locations doesn't make sense. That means that this is either your power or your ground. Now, it's a cardinal sin to send power down a black wire, so that one, in my mind, has to be a ground. Similarly, right here, we see that there is a split off of the blue wire. Again, going to another connector. What this tells me is that that also cannot be the signal wire. That leaves the white wire that I've labeled yellow has to be your signal wire. Going back to the original question, we have the 3 wires on the pigtail, and we have the 3 wires that are being held in the guy's hand. Now, for the 3 wires in hand, the ones that actually go to the engine wiring harness, that's where you can run your continuity check to your ECU pins to see which pin maps where and to make sure that you have the right wire identified. The other option you can do, like I mentioned, key in the ignition position, check for power, check for ground, and then you'll know your signal wire as well. Now, when it comes to the pigtail side of things, I wouldn't rely on what we see right here. You can kind of tell the red wire is on the top, then you have yellow and green. But what I would do is I would look at the connector, like I said, facing the inside of the connector, right? Orient it the way it's oriented in the factory service manual, and then do a continuity check on each pin to the wire and label them top, middle, and bottom pins, right? On your wires, top, middle, and bottom wires. That way you know that even if the red wire comes in at the top of the back of the connector, it actually does map to the pin that is at the top. Once you have your 3 wires on the pigtail labeled and your 3 wires on the engine harness labeled, it really is just a matter of connecting them all up. I suggest the last wire that you do be the signal wire. That way you can give the sensor power and then check the voltage on the signal wire as you move your throttle. The engine doesn't have to be on. As you move the throttle, you should see a change in the voltage because the sensor is going to be sending a different signal. That's how you will be able to solve this wiring problem and get your engine running the way it should be. Mountain Special, I hope this was helpful to you. If you have any other wiring questions, or if anyone watching has a wiring question, drop it in the comments below. You can also write to me on Reddit. It's the same username across both. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video, and I'll see you next time.